Hi, we're going to try something a little bit different this time. I'm going to try some channeling. Now, the person that I'm going to communicate with is actually a spirit that I encountered when we were staying in a cabin up in northwestern Maine. And it was winter, and I came out, and I came around the edge of the cabin, and I sort of was going up this little steep incline, and I was presented with her energy in front of me, and was immediately fascinated by it because she didn't look anything like anything that I had ever seen before. Sorry, Mathilde. So her name is Mathilde. And Mathilde presented herself to me wearing multiple layers of heavy wool, roughly wool woven fabric. She had a coat. It was big, heavy, like a blanket coat. And it had a big hood. And the hood sort of came down around. She had a hat on underneath it, which I'm guessing was probably either felted or knit or something like that. She had, her hair was in braids, which came down the sides. She had layers of like material and scarf here, roughly wooden buttons down the front. It was belted at the waist. And the coat came down probably about knee length. I could see that there was like a dress or a tunic or something that was underneath that. From there, I see boots that were not a traditional boot like we would have. They were like deerskin, and they were laced up her legs, like they had crosses up their legs, upper legs. And she was wearing like things that sort of what we would call a wristlet now. Come on to your knuckles. But there seemed to be like heavy layers around her wrists as well. And as I said, I was very surprised by it. And over the course of the 2 days that we stayed there, I sort of became friends, so to speak, with Mathilde. And Mathilde told me her name. And it's kind of an unusual spelling. It's not Matilda, it's Mathilde, which is Mathilde. And I had never heard this name before. But it was, I did some research on it afterwards and found that apparently this is a saint that the French had churches named after. So I should preface this. Okay. She told me that she came from what is now Canada. And she lived in many places. Her husband, she called him her husband. I'm not sure if they were ever actually married in a church, but she called him her husband. And his name had been Jacques. And I'm 3 years of French and I'm still going to screw that up. Jacques. And he had been a trapper. And he had taken her with him as they, or pretty much, she had pretty much insisted on being taken along. And they were everywhere from Quebec over across to northern, I guess where Vermont and New York meet. somewhere in there, near Montreal, I guess. So yeah, so that is the basic information on Mathilde. If I had to put a date on this, I would say it was somewhere around 1720s. There were a lot of wars going on at that time. She was fairly adventuresome. And I think she was that way as a child. She went with him very young. She was like, I want to say 13 or 14 when she went with him. So she was very, very young. You have to remember, though, back then, people had families starting at that age. That was not uncommon. And she came from a very large family. They lived in a city or in a town that was fairly busy. I don't just call it a city. But there was a town with, she's told me there were churches. And she's correcting me now. It's not a city. But she says it was outside of Montreal. What is Montreal now? Yeah, okay. I don't think she's that impressed with what Montreal is right now. She says they spoke French. They were Catholic. And she was raised, they weren't poor, but they were not well-to-do either. She said her father was a merchant. Assume that means he owned a shop. So I'm asking Mathilde, how did you meet Jacques? How did you come to be with Jacques? And she says she was very, what's that word? Sometimes the translations don't work very well. What's the word? She says she was very, like precocious is the energy she's giving me. That she was one of the older ones, and there were a lot of them in the family. And so she wasn't going to be, it was sort of a case where she wasn't going to get a dowry. She was not going to have money for her father to get a wealthy husband or anything like that. It was not that case. And she says things were different here. She said it was not around the time of, like, our papa, he came from France, and she says he came around, where was your papa from? Somewhere around, Lyons? And she said that they had to come for a new life, and Mama came with her. Okay, so she was here. Her father was a merchant. All right, so how did you meet Jacques? And he came to dinner. Her father knew him. He was older. I hear sounds like a male saying to take care of Jacques. She was looking for someone to take care of him. He hadn't been married before. And when older, I say he was quite a bit older. He was not a bad man, but he was not he wasn't very comforting. And so she's saying it was hard at first because he took her away and she didn't have any family. And I see she's showing me them going through deep snow, and using, they improvised these snowshoes that they used because where they were going there were no trails, and the snow was so deep if you fell in it, it was not good. You could be hard to get back out of it. And it was along a river. They went along a river. They followed the rivers. So what was he trapping? He was trapping beaver. Pelts. She says pelts. Okay. Thank you. She said they lived this way. They didn't go into towns very often. And that they did you have a home? They had a cabin, and it was close to a lake where the river met the lake. Where would that be now? So it would be, she's showing me around New York. She said there was a lot of wars there, and they couldn't stay there all the time. Okay. Let me get back into it here. It was in there and it got pulled out. Were you happy with? She said happy wasn't a choice. It was what it was. Did you have children? I'm sorry. She says she had one and it died very young, as born, yeah. When it was born. She sort of shrugged. It makes her sad, but it made me sad. She said it was the life they had. And she said after that, she said it was very different after that. She said sometimes he would go into town and he would leave her back because some of the towns that he went into were too rough for her to go in. They were like, I want to say mining towns almost. There were rivers that went up this way. Because she's showing me this river, but there were rivers that went up this way. And they were rough towns. And she says sometimes she would sneak in. And he'd get mad. He didn't want her to go into them because he was afraid for her. She says love wasn't part of it, but she said he did good with her. He did good by her. And he died, and she kept going. I don't know, how old were you when he died? How old were you when he died? She doesn't know, but she thinks she was older. And she says she just kept doing what he taught her to do. He taught her how to do it, so she kept doing it. But she says things changed as she got older, and that she couldn't do it as well. And she died. What did you die from? Part of it was loneliness. She says, but she was in a cabin. She said, and this time it was, so it was closer to Quebec. She said she stayed there and she died there. She doesn't know what she died from. She was lonely, but people would bring her bread. So it feels like there were some people. She said more people came as they were out there. All right. Mathilde, have you crossed over? Have you crossed over? She says no. Why? Because it's her life. She just keeps doing what she's doing, so she's still there. Don't you want to go with your family? It's very sad. You can go with your family. She says, I'm part of the family. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mathilde. Sorry. I'm honored. So, Mathilde, I haven't been able to find her records. I've looked, and they didn't keep a lot of records, especially for a female back then in that area. So there isn't a whole lot. The closest I came was to finding the information on Mathilde Saint. Um, so yeah, so that is. I thought I would sort of bring that forward. She's been sort of bugging me to do this. Because she's fascinated by it. She doesn't understand technology, but she likes to watch things. But she comes and goes very often. She's she's. Oh, did you just see that? Go that way. Okay. All right. So, yeah. So that was a channeling session. And like I said, it's not a traditional channeling session. It wasn't, or it's the way I handle it. It's the way I do it. I am so familiar with her energy that I can get in and out of it fairly easily. I have had other spirits that I can channel, but she's the one that comes through most often for me, and she sort of acts like a guide for me now because she is around me and she knows I can see her and I understand her. And yeah, so like she said, we're family now. So, all right, well, I hope you find this fascinating. If you don't, it's not your thing, I get it. Please keep in mind that this is extremely vulnerable for me to try and put this out here. I don't share a lot of this, so, but she wanted to be shared. So I hope you enjoyed it and meeting Mathilde. And when you go and have a quiet moment, say a prayer for those that have crossed. They're really not that far away. So, all right. Thanks. Bye.